Hello. Today we're investigating some potential water intrusion locations and getting those sealed up before the storm. And here's a few things you may need. You want some wet patch, some construction adhesive that deals with masonry, a couple of disposable putty knives, possibly some mesh, some disposable gloves, a couple of trash bags, and some rags, preferably Bubba Joe's good socks. And if you have solar panels, you're going to want a drop cloth and a piece of plywood or some sort of sheet material, and I'll show you why in a little bit. The trick on walking on tile is to always walk in the lower grooves, and it minimizes any breakage. Our first order of business needs to be anything that might be broken. So we're wanting to use the construction adhesive first. This will give it time to set up for any other sealing or repairing. You take the construction adhesive and you put it on both ends. Make sure it's masonry construction adhesive and then fit it back into place. Just like that. Pretty easy. There we go. And take one of Bubba Joe's good socks and just wipe the excess off. In this case, there was a lot of excess apparently. Take it down as much as you can without disturbing the new bond. And that should take care of that. Now this piece right here isn't as significant, but the problem is we've got a little bit of a opening right there between the two tiles. So we are going to put this one back. The little construction adhesive on both sides. We'll get it back into place. As long as the construction adhesive makes full coverage, we're not going to have to put any roof sealer here. Now we do have one over here, kind of odd. We're going to have to reconnect that piece. Carefully lift up tile, put something underneath it to be able to get to this one. Then we're going to get some construction adhesive in here. We're going to get it in place. Like we may put a little bit more here. There we go. That'll hold quite well. Let that set up. Leave it alone. We don't have to mess with it anymore. Just as long as we don't step on it or step anywhere near it, we'll be fine. Now this guy, he doesn't want to be where he belongs. Problem is, he doesn't have any nail holes or a location to nail to. So we're going to have to fix that. And the way we're going to do that is to put a dab of construction adhesive here. Okay, more than a dab, but enough. That'll be enough to get it to hold in place. Just simply get it back in place. There we go. Got another one right above it. Again, no screw hole. So we just want to give it enough where it has something to grab onto so it doesn't shake loose. Once that sets up, it's not going to allow it to go anywhere. Here's one that usually creates an issue because there is no nail location for this. So we want to make sure that this is secured by slapping a good amount on it so we can get this on there and it makes contact. If you're using multiple tubes of construction adhesive, you could just reuse the same tip over and over again. So that way, if you have any left over at any given time, you can use one of the tips that didn't get cut and you can store it and save it a lot easier that way. So right here, we've got a big gap here, and this is where the roof patch comes into play. Anything that's going to be tar based, roof patch, wet patch, you're going to want the tubes to sit out in the sun a little bit and warm up. They'll flow a lot easier. You'll just have to be very careful because sometimes once they start flowing, they choose not to stop. You want to make sure you find any openings on the transitions between the previous wet patch and the tile. That way, you're not going to get moisture or water getting through. Just fill them in, even if they don't have anything vulnerable underneath them, just so it doesn't make it into an area where it would be vulnerable for it. We'll use all of the stuff that's existing here, I'll leave it there, and then build on that, so that way we don't have to fill in too big a gap. These tend to face downward a little bit, so I'm going to fill that in, and that will discourage water intrusion also. These all roll downhill too. And this one is a bit of an odd one. We've got tile here that seems to have had a defect in it that wasn't filled in. So that's where the putty knife comes into play. There we go. An easy enough fix right there. On larger areas like that, we will revisit them to make sure that they filled in well. But we want to let it set up a little bit before we determine if we need to use mesh or not. In this spot, we're going to use the mesh, and this is roofing mesh, so it adheres to the wet patch. And not that it really needs to look pretty, but at least make sure it doesn't look ugly. Go that, and it helps push it into where it needs to be. I'm going to put the mesh in here too, if you give something to grab onto. Now, onto the extrusions. And this is where the gloves and Bubba Joe's good socks really come into play.
You are probably still curious as to what purpose the drop cloth and oriented strand board serves when dealing with obstructions that block off workspaces on the roof, specifically, the vulnerable nature of photovoltaic panels. To avoid damaging these panels, we lay out a drop cloth over the panels and set the OSB over the drop cloth. The OSB distributes the weight over a larger area of the panel, and the drop cloth prevents the OSB from scratching and gouging the panels. For the best outcome, align the OSB so that the weight is distributed along the frame and brackets of the panel.